Welcome to Theme Weavers, your weekly wisdom for weaving yoga themes into your classes to inspire your students. We're your hosts, Heidi
and Farin. Welcome to Theme Weavers for our 30th episode. Oh my God, 30. 30? 30. I know. That's cool. Today, Farin and I are excited to interview one of my close friends, the amazing Elissa Marshall, about her back pocket theme. So in case this is the first episode you're listening to, please check out episode 2 of the Theme Weavers podcast for details and background on the structure of how and why to weave themes through your yoga classes. Okay, enough about that. You've probably heard that every episode since everybody listens to every single one, obviously. So now we'd like to welcome Elissa. So Elissa is a New York City-based yoga and Legree instructor. Is that how you say it? Legree?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, cool. To healing and empowering others through yoga and fitness. As an ex-professional dancer, Elissa turned to yoga because she realized that the most important thing about movement is how it makes you feel. You can experience her mindful approach to yoga at Alo Yoga and Sui
Yoga.
Yeah? Sui Yoga in New York City. I feel like you're also someplace else
I'm also
now.
at Lifetime, which is very recent. I used to be at Lifetime, took a hiatus, now I'm back, and they're all over New York City as well.
Yeah, so you can find her there. Or she has a branded Breathe and Be class online through NeoU Fitness, which is amazing because I got to take a lot of them over the pandemic and it was like a lifeline. Absolutely loved it. Oh, the pandemic.
Oof.
Remember that? Oh. Okay, so though Elissa was originally born in Texas, she is married to her Colombian soulmate, speaks fluent Spanish, and loves to travel.
Well, I sent you the
Farin and
older
Elissa can
version.
speak in Spanish.
In my
Is this bad?
No, but
Okay.
in my updated version, I was like, my husband's probably embarrassed if anybody reads that. But anyway, it is true though.
Okay, he can be super embarrassed, but he's super cute. He's not going to be embarrassed. Are you kidding? The things that you put online of him, like, there's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's all good. Okay, you should also follow Elissa for movement inspiration or just like beautiful things. She's Gesticulate, Gesticule.
Yeah, a lot of people don't
on
realize it's a
Instagram.
word. It means to gesture.
Tell
means
us.
to gesture, which if you ever take a class of mine, you'll see that I'm a very gestural person. Obviously, this is a podcast, so you won't see half my gestures, but just imagine me gesturing all the time.
Well, if they're good, Farin turns them into amazing Instagram reels, especially if they're funny. So, like, if you do amazing things with your hands, like, they will be on there.
We'll go with it.
In fact, I had actually never heard the word gesticulate before you.
She does her
hair. So I like now hear the word gesticulate sometimes, and John and I always look at each other and we're like, Elissa. Okay, so I met Elissa in the early days of the pandemic when we signed up for the same 300-hour yoga teacher training. We were put into a mentor group with Bo Campbell was our mentor. She's amazing. And eventually, as time went on, we struck our own little friendship with each other. And we probably talked close to every day or so, sometimes more on the 100%.
Right? There was a long stretch that, like, if I hadn't heard from you, I was like, are you okay? Like, of course, you have take your time to respond, but just want to make sure you're okay. Signs of life. So we'd have several chats. It's like we had our like Marco Polo video conversations going, but then if I was worried about you, I would text you or like send you a WhatsApp too. So we had multiple connections.
All the
avenues were open.
Right? I folded a lot of laundry talking to you.
Or washing dishes.
But we talked about everything, right? Always the dishes. Yep. And we talked about everything, right? Marriage, friendship, pretty deep philosophy and inner healing. Like it ran everything.
We know everything about each other.
So I'm just going to be honest.
Honestly.
We do. And like, here's my favorite part about it. So when I first met you, Elissa, I think I've told you this. I was crazy intimidated by you. You know this.
Yeah,
yes?
we chatted.
Yeah. So she had like over 60,000 followers on Instagram, which is like insane, and she's so beautiful and flexible and like strong, and she can put her body into these like awe-inspiring shapes to me. And because of my own inner demons, I believed that like I was not good enough as a yoga teacher or friend. And this is like, I learned so much from you because that's just like total bullshit, right? Like anybody, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter what you can do or what you can't do or who you are, or how many people you know. It's like your soul, right? So she taught me so many humbling lessons over the past few years about not judging a book by its cover, about knowing the person and not the image, about not having to look through have to look the same or do the same things with your life and career to have value. And that even our curated social media life is not actually able to depict who a person truly is.
No.
Right? Did I get it?
I also feel like it comes back, and I'm sure we'll talk more about this, that like yoga is not just the physical practice. Like to me, yoga is much beyond that. And like we have all these things that we do, but like you're saying, the true yoga is what's happening underneath the surface of it. And that's something that's really important to me. Thus we discover.
It is. Like you don't necessarily know that, right?
Yeah.
And we don't always know that when we look at one little thing and we don't actually like know the real truth and real person. It's a good lesson for me. It's changed a lot. So I had the privilege of practicing both online and in real life with Elissa, and I absolutely love her classes and her energy. And when I go to New York, it's like my favorite thing. I go to a fish show and I go take yoga with Elissa.
That is Heidi in a nutshell.
Right? That's me in a nutshell. She puts so much care into everything that she does and teaches, and getting to practice in her space and energy is a gift. So if you're in New York City, like go find her. And I wish that New York wasn't as far away from Massachusetts as it was, so I could see you more than just when I'm there for fish. Let's see.
But
beyond that,
fish,
I'm just like talking you up, right?
More tours through to bring Heidi through more. That's a plug.
That's right. Fish. That's right. They just need to go to Madison Square Garden more. So beyond that, Elissa's a brand new mom to an adorable little boy who has, I assume, shifted your whole experience as a person, wife, and yogi. Yeah.
It's interesting because I feel like I'm the same person, but everything's just heightened. Everything's just like much more technicolor, and like the swings of life are much more swingy, but I feel like myself still at the same, if that makes sense.
I love
Like
that.
when I went back to work after maternity leave, I was like, I'm myself, but expanded. That's how I feel. Yeah.
It's probably because you've done so much
I
work
like
on
that.
yourself before becoming a mother versus like I was younger than you when I became a mom, and I did not feel that way.
Listen, my husband and I have been together for like 11 years before we thought to have a kid. So that also, I think, having an incredible partner, knowing each other and knowing yourself, yeah, that makes a huge difference, I think. Not saying any of this is easy,
It really does.
but I'm just saying,
Oh.
yeah, I feel like myself. I'm also, I think I was probably already crazy before having kids. So also the crazy is not weird.
I mean, probably. I like the probably. Were you probably a little crazy?
I was very much crazy. Someone recently was like, "Oh, so now that you have kids, you're like slowing down, aren't you?" And I was like, "You are,
Do you know me?
one, do you know me? But two, you have never been a parent."
No, it's nonstop.
Yeah.
It's just different.
It's different
nonstop. And you travel a lot. I always say when you travel with a kid, it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah. We've already gone to Colombia with him. I hosted a yoga retreat in January in Costa Rica, and I took him with me. And
how old was he?
He was 5 months old at that point.
I'm so grateful that Elissa, that you're my friend, and I'm honored that you're able to find the time to join us today on Theme Weavers. So Farin, meet Elissa. Elissa, meet Farin. Everybody, meet Elissa. Elissa, meet everybody that's listening. Did I leave anything out? Like, what do you want to tell listeners about yourself that I might have left out?
About myself, another thing that I might not have, you mentioned at the top, I am a Legree instructor. And what that means, it's like a method derived from Pilates. Think of like Pilates on crack. It's a very dynamic practice. But the one thing I've also, and I'm sure this will come back up to at other moments, but for me, yoga teaching even goes into fitness. I like to remind people in my yoga classes that like the Yoga Sutras have like what, maybe 2 sutras about the physical postures. And so a lot of, the yoga that we're doing is about our concentration, about how the agreements that we have with ourselves, the agreements we have with others, the way we're focusing, where we're being with discomfort, et cetera. And so I feel like I bring a lot of a yogic mindset to the fitness that I teach. And in that sense, I feel like I mentioned, like yoga to me is everything. It's like the way you go about life. And that's really important to me, even in the non-yoga work that I do.
I like that because I feel like a lot of people are the opposite, where they bring so much fitness to yoga that they forget about all the other aspects of yoga. versus you're taking yoga into even the fitness and life things that you do. And that's living your yoga, right? That's pretty awesome.
Absolutely. And I feel like that also was my mindset of going into childbirth. Like childbirth is a very physical thing, both the 9 months of
Sure is.
carrying and then the delivering as well. But then like how you're focusing on your breath and how you're focusing on the present moment and like not letting yourself get overwhelmed. Same with fitness. Like people go into fitness class wanting to do the thing, and sometimes they're just kind of burning themselves out and not getting to the essence of what you're focusing on in any given moment, or they're trying to check it off their list of like, I did. Even people that go to yoga are trying to check it off the list, like, got my yoga done today or got my fitness class done today. And I'm like, well, but like, you got to actually be here. And if you are actually here right now, that's when I feel more refreshed after teaching or taking a class. It's because I was present. And then it's that present moment awareness that goes into the next thing.
Yeah. I'm smiling because that was the theme of my class today, about how I love a good to-do list and how I feel so fulfilled when I cross it off at the end of the day and it's all done. And like yoga is often on my to-do list. And that is like so counterintuitive to what the whole point of this is. And that was my Dharma talk was around that. That's really funny that you just brought that up.
I'm not gonna lie. I think back when we did our 300 hour, I wanted to really challenge myself to do meditation, and I got onto like a 6 month kick where I did meditation every single day. And then I got to about 6 months and I was like, this is stupid. I need to, I can't do this anymore, because I was literally checking it off the list and moving on to the next thing as opposed to being present in the meditation. So I've turned it more into like, my walking is granted, I live in New York City, so I walk everywhere, but like, I will have at least one walk, maybe from my house to the subway, or like I'll go to the park where it's like, I'm not listening to anything. I'm not focused on anything but like breathing and walking. And doesn't have to be long. It can be like a single minute, a single 60-second of your day.
Even that can feel so long some days,
True.
right? Ugh. All right, Farin, take it away.
Yeah. Well, I mean, speaking about bringing more of like the sutras and yoga philosophy into your fitness classes, just in case you haven't listened to Theme Weavers before, our show, we are focused on sharing yoga themes that are tied to Patanjali's Yoga Sutras or any other texts. We offer tips on how to deliver a Dharma talk on the theme, how to weave a thematic through-line phrase through the class to remind students of the theme, how to match a peak posture with that theme, and how to conclude a class so that students can continue to reflect on the theme off of the mat and into their life so they're actually living and practicing their yoga. We have shared with our listeners our back pocket themes. This is one that you can metaphorically just whip out of your back pocket. You can teach it any style of class, even if it's not even yoga, like your Legree classes or, however that might work. It's any time of the day, any season, any posture or sequence in mind. The theme is just one that you have in your back pocket. You have it in your mind. You can deliver it and you're comfortable with it. So the question is, Elissa, what is your back pocket theme?
I think it's very funny because when I walked into my first 200-hour yoga training, and the very first day we all sat down and the teacher was like, so what does yoga even mean? And everyone literally like looked around and was just like, ah. And maybe some people offered an answer. I was like, I knew I'd get it wrong. So I think I just like kind of was sitting silently with bated breath. And it's that first Yoga Sutra, if I'm now I want to be correct, but it is my back pocket sutra always, of Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha, where she was just like, the teacher said, yoga is the quieting of the fluctuations of the mind. And it was incredible because everyone just was silent and let it land. And in that, like, oh, duh, like, of course it is. But at the same time, like, well, I never really thought about it that way because, of course, we're fresh students. We hadn't studied the Yoga Sutras yet. But then it was also beautiful because just everybody letting it land was the quieting of the fluctuations of the mind. And I feel like that is hands down. If I have not prepared anything, that's what I go to. But also, it's my guide of like, what am I going to talk about today? And I don't know. It's the first thing I go to of like, I'm just going to sit for a moment and let it come to me. So it's a theme that I will often weave just like without having to think about it. It just naturally comes out. But then also it's my first step of teaching a class. And I'm like, oh, geez, what am I going to weave into the theme? And I always start every class with a moment of silence. So that whether that is my back pocket theme that I'm just like, we're pulling that out today, or whether I'm just like searching for a theme, I'm not searching for it. I'm letting the fluctuations of my mind quiet down, and then something arises. So that's like honestly the first step of any class.
I love that. I love how you use your back pocket theme to deliver your back pocket theme.
Do you tell that story of your, like when I stepped into my first training as a yoga teacher, that like, do you tell that if it was your Dharma talk, let's say after that moment of silence, do you actually deliver it that way? Because it's really good.
I've never actually said that in class. One thing that I like to say in class, and now this is a little bit of sidetrack, but we'll get back on track. I remind people, I'd be like, this is actually true. Another story that's true is like when I was younger, I thought that if I did the yoga postures perfectly enough, then I would become enlightened. And I realized with time, it's not the yoga postures that enlighten you. It's the process of being present as you're going through the journey of learning these postures that actually makes you become wiser and more mindful.
That story though can be also a Dharma talk that you offer at the beginning.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Like,
traveling is another whole situation where, it's not the more I travel, the more I'm like, I feel like I see places are more similar than different. So I'm like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, that's not a big deal to travel now. But it was like everything I had to go through to become a good traveler and to like be okay out of my comfort zone. Like it's the same thing. It's not the traveling person. It's not the fact that like, oh, I've been to Europe and I've been to here and I've been to there. It's like I'm not enlightened because I've checked it off. I've checked it off the box. It's because of the experience that you've gone through and this comfort that you've inevitably, like no one's going to lie to me. Like inevitably, if you've traveled, you've been uncomfortable and you've been like, holy crap, like I don't know how I'm going to get myself out of X, Y, or Z situation. I don't know how I'm going to go from A to B. And it's not the doing, it's the underneath the surface stuff that's.
I think that can pertain to anything that you're doing, right? Whether it's language, whether it's travel. I'm sitting here thinking as you guys were talking about this, like for me, it's music, right? Like for me to be able to learn how to play a piece of music or play it in a band or something like that is an outcome, but the outcome isn't what makes you an evolved or better musician, right? It's the experience of creation and the practice that you put into it and the ability to change things on the go or to be able to just go with the flow of what's happening around you that makes you really elevate yourself musically, not being able to be like, check, done, we nailed that song, nailed it, done, right? Like it's that same idea.
And this is why in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, there's only like maybe two, correct me if I'm wrong, sutras about the physical postures, because it's not about the physical postures. Like that is one way to go about putting all of the sutras into practice. But by this thread, music is a yogic practice. Like I mentioned before, fitness can be a yogic practice, traveling can be a yogic practice, having a baby can be a yogic practice, being a parent can be a yogic practice. It's like where you're putting all of that into play.
The way that we share the yoga practice predominantly is the physical. And yet you see pictures of like people floating underneath banyan trees or something. And you think that like, oh, if I do the physical, I'm going to float under a banyan tree. Like, right. Like that's the image that we get. And there's no real steps for a lot of teachers, present company excluded. There's no real steps that show you that like, hey, just because you can do a kick-ass crow does not mean that you're about to float your crow underneath a tree.
Right.
Like that's not what it's about. But I don't think that a lot of, maybe it's the oversaturation in the yoga world. I don't know what it is in the
And
West, but
also
like there's no real.
it's the commercialized nature of the Western yoga world. Full confession, the yoga, because I was a professional dancer, and I remember thinking like yoga's for sissies. Like I don't need that. Fast forward, spoiler alert, yoga also saved my career in other moments just because it gave me the mindfulness to hone in on myself. But the yoga that got me started, because I thought yoga was for sissies, was Bikram yoga. And I was like, oh, yoga can be hard. Oh, it's discipline. Oh, like they yell at you. And I thought that that was the path to enlightenment. And that sold me an image of like, do it right. And then you're like a good yogi. And turns out, probably, I can't speak for everybody, but everyone was somewhat suffering on the inside because how we thought we had to live life. And I was also a
Yeah.
professional dancer at the time, so that's what I knew, and it was playing to what I knew, but it was playing into make you come back and take another class, and make you come back and follow more, and just like that. Um,
Do more, do better, do it the right, like do it, do
super
it, do it.
unhealthy, super unhealthy in that sense. And thank goodness for the path that I've taken and the teachers that um, I've studied with, and just like the people that have been in my life. Like, yeah, and this ties back to how Heidi met me and was like, I don't know if I can be friends with this girl. Like, I love the physical challenge and I still chase after the physical challenge. But after having a baby and then being postpartum, my body can't do the same thing at the moment. I've gone through different um I've gone through different phases of physical practice, but because I know that yoga is showing up and being present and breathing and accepting where I am for the day, I have been able to keep going back to yoga and also go back to the megaformer, that's the Lagree practice with a yoga mindset, without feeling bad about myself. Because if I still was in that like achievement mindset, like I can't have a baby and do yoga. Like those two things don't go together if I'm thinking that the physical posture is the end all be all of the practice.
Right.
Thank goodness that I'm able to see below the surface. And it doesn't mean I don't keep striving. That's why my Instagram is like crazy things out there.
But striving is abhyasa, right? That's the effort that you're putting in because you're trying to get your body to be able to do
Yes.
things. And yet in opposition, you can surrender to the fact that like vairagya, right? Like you can surrender to the fact that your body might not be able to look like
Yes.
it used to look, and you might not be able to do things in exactly the same way. And that's okay for
Yes.
today.
Unattached
Right. And
to the result.
yes. But that doesn't mean that you don't still desire, like you haven't renounced things. Like you're still a human living in this world that wants things, whether it's your body to do or look a certain way or to whatever it is. Like you want to be able to do things, and also the results of that desire. Okay, I'm not a bad person, I'm not a bad yogi, I'm not like an ugly human, I'm not weak. Like this is just where I am right now,
Exactly.
right? Like
And that's a beautiful
that's the
thing
practice.
to capture. Of course, talking to two moms, like when you are pregnant, your body is different every single day. And instead of worrying about what you've lost, it's like getting connected to where you are at this moment. That was such a beautiful, like my practice was such a beautiful through line throughout my entire pregnancy. And the Bikram yogi of me and the professional dancer of me was terrified of ever becoming pregnant because of I won't be able to do this anymore and I will lose X, Y, and Z pose. And like, turns out if I'm really just connected to the moment and my breath and what I can do for today, I didn't miss anything when I couldn't do it. And turns out like a lot of that is already back. But I had to have my
Yeah.
hand open and let it flow. I couldn't just grasp onto anything. Otherwise, I was denying my reality in the moment. That's a really icky place to live.
What a gift. Again, maybe that's why, like, part of the gift of waiting so long to have children, you got to be able to do that work first to give you that. Could you imagine if 11 years ago you had a baby and how you would have treated yourself in your mind? That's scary. That's where I was at. Even though I practice yoga, I didn't practice yoga the way that I understand yoga now, right? So like when I was pregnant, I was not open-handed. I was not nice to myself. So it's what a gift. Were you, Farin? Were you practicing yoga before having your kids? I don't think so, right?
Yeah. So I would say I was doing yoga, not practicing yoga. I wasn't living yoga, but I was like going to a yoga class or like rolling out my mat and practicing postures. But I wasn't like living yoga like we are now.
That is different.
So yeah,
Okay.
very different.
So just to keep us on slight track, Elissa. Okay, so back pocket yoga chitta vritti
Yes, that's my go-to.
Like yoga is the stilling of the cessations of the mind, and I think a lot of people will identify with the fact that you don't linger for a long Dharma talk. It sounds like you just give like a sprinkle and then you keep threading it throughout the class. So if I was unrolling, if I just showed up at Aloe right now or Sui or Lifetime on my mat in your room and you're like, "Hi everybody, I'm Elissa." What do you say next? Like, how do you deliver that blip? Take us through.
Let me land for a second.
Yeah, take your moment.
I'll have everybody come into a comfortable seated shape or whatever pose we're starting in for the day. And truly, this is how I find the words, because it might come out different every time I'm using this back pocket theme. So that's also why I let everybody land. And I'll also, fun background is I am trauma informed with my yoga practice, my yoga teaching. And so I'll usually take people through a trauma informed grounding. And that just is like a very slow and purposeful way to find your seat and close your eyes. So I'll give everybody a moment. Just land. Just notice what you're showing up with. And I'll usually tell people we're going to do some yoga and we're going to move our bodies. And yes, we've come to think of yoga as this physical practice, as it is. But I'll even mention, like, yoga sutras that yoga is based off of, it only has maybe two, I'll have to go study it, but we'll say about 2 sutras about the physical practice. But truly, the heart of yoga is in the very first line. Yoga is the quieting of the fluctuations of the mind. So let that land. And any little intro or like mini Dharma talk, I'll call it, since I don't talk too much, it's meant to set up a moment of silence so that then people can just be. And I will let people be. If this is a different day and I'm trying to introduce it in a different way, I will, as people sit down, I'll be like, our life we're living kind of like a snow globe, going from one thing to the next. It's always, we're shaking ourselves up. But if you set that snow globe down, then you can allow the fluctuations of your mind to settle down, just like a snow globe. All the dust settles to the bottom. And then that sets me up for just a moment of silence. So to me, any theme, or if I'm using this as my back pocket theme, there's different ways to introduce it. But the idea is to introduce a moment of silence, because that is the actual, like, we learn from words and everything. And I think that the words are important to frame what we're doing, but we're only going to remember we're going to remember the experience more than the words themselves. So that's why I always let them experience that quieting of the fluctuations of the mind. It's funny because I was also teaching a workshop, and I always have this in the back of my head. It's like, it is yoga. It literally is yoga. And I remember one time, I think I was proposing a question to people, and I was like, about yoga. And I was like, what is it? And somehow in my mom brain, I like forgot what I was going to say next. And I literally just left silence, and everyone was looking at me. I think I'd like posed a question, and I was like, everyone's like, should we answer the question? I go, no, it's this. Did you just feel that? It's the quieting of the fluctuations of the mind. And I was like, I just completely went like blank for a second, but I was like,
drop the mic.
But then listen, like, nothing is an accident. Nothing, like, that was, if I hadn't like had a lapse, like, everything is yoga. Trust that everything is yoga. And it brought me back to my back pocket theme, which I don't think I was trying to do, but then it conveniently did.
But you needed it right then.
Needed it. I mean, but that's also why I use it as my stabilizer, because it's great to introduce to people, but it's the first thing that I use. Because if I try to come up with a theme beforehand, it's not going to come out right. I have to let myself settle.
So throughout your class, do you have a thematic through line phrase that you say?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're going with Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha, which is Yoga Sutra
No.
1.2, but you're not going to speak Sanskrit to your class throughout the class. So what do you tell them to like bring them back?
It will depend on the example I gave to set it up. Because also people are going to be able to hold on to imagery. And if there was an image that was landing with me for the day, then that's the image that I'm going to stick with. So the last thing I just mentioned was the snow globe effect of like, let all the dust settle to the ground. And so we might be in a yoga pose and, I like feel this and I don't talk in like your knee has to be stacked over the ankle, et cetera, but I'll call it alignment. We'll call it organic alignment. So I'll get into all this organic alignment. And then I might say, and then let the dust settle. Like let your mind quiet down. Let the dust settle. Let your mind quiet down. And I'll even sometimes acknowledge, I'll be like, we're doing this and that and like a very fiery and feel this, da, 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 and then all of a sudden with the intonation of my voice, then I'll usually say that through line in a more settling way. Because
you bring the earth.
Yeah, because it's to remember like, yeah, of course you're trying to like dot your T's and cross your I's and you're trying to get into this posture. We're striving, we're putting the right effort in, but then also come back to the fact that like, it's not about actually doing it right. It's about being able to do all of that crazy stuff in whatever given pose it is, but then keeping your mind calm. That's the magic. That's where the power's at. So in this example of a class of the snow globe, because I like the visual of it right now, I'll be like, okay, and we're here for 3 breaths. Let the dust settle down. Set that snow globe down. Repetition is powerful, but I just want it to feel the same. Like I want the point to feel the same, but appropriate for whatever given moment that we're at. So I might not say it the same.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I don't think I say it the same every time. That would be weird. That would be too scripted for me. Not that's about weird as why would I say that? It would make me feel very scripted. Like I would have had to have it planned out because in reality, if I'm in the moment in my teaching, I'm not necessarily going to remember what I said 5 poses ago. I'm going to remember the tone of what I'm trying to say, but the way I say it's not going to be exactly the same unless I'm reading off of like a piece of paper, which I don't do.
When you're newer at it, it can be helpful to say it exactly the same. But I think testing you and making sure that you are aligned on that through line and that theme. But I think the more and more that I teach, again, we're not always going to remember what the teacher said. We're going to remember the way it made us feel. And so I think the more skillful we are as teachers, and also I think it's true that you can say something and it's not going to land the same for everybody. You can say one sentence and it's not going to land for everybody. So I think slightly varying your through line as you go through class, but hitting on that same essence, it can actually be really helpful for different people in the room.
I agree, because different people hear it in different ways. All right, so if we're going with the whole...
We're with the snow globe now. I'm going to stick with the snow globe.
We got the snow globe. We're sticking with the snow globe. Let the dust settle. Let the mind settle. They're in Shavasana. You're wrapping them up. They're in the fetal position on the side. When do you say what you want to leave them with? Is it like at the end of Shavasana? Is it when they're on their side? Is it when they're seated? Like, how do you wrap it up?
It's interesting because I actually one of the studios that I teach at, Sui, they actually like to leave students in Shavasana and like let students seal their practice on their own. And
what?
Yeah.
Like you walk out? Like you're just like gone? You like leave, you're like, I leave you in peace and you leave?
And everyone can do it slightly different, but once class is over and I'm looking at the clock, I turn the music down and I tell them before I leave them. I tell them that the music's going to go down and then you're going to hear the one sound of the singing bowl. That's how you know class is over. And it's beautiful because a lot of people will stay longer. And then it's less like, oh, I need to like hold you to staying long. Everyone it's pick your own adventure at the end. But what I realized, what I really love about it is I am introducing the final wrap-up theme. And now I realize it's not just in my classes at Sui Yoga that I do this. I do this other places now too. I start to do this now because truly, somebody asked the other day, they were like, what is your peak posture in class today? And I think mine was dance or pose or something like that. And then that same person went and asked one of my colleagues, I was like, what is your peak posture in class today? And he goes, Shavasana. And I was like, you're right. But then to me, I've realized there's a peak physical posture, but then the peak through line posture, if your through line is going through, like the peak of it, shouldn't that be Shavasana? Like, shouldn't you bring it full circle right before they go into Shavasana so that then you're having a revelatory moment where you're just bathing in, you're not necessarily thinking it through, but you're just letting the echo of the through line go all the way through Shavasana. So I've started, as we wrap things up, I'm trying to think of the way I would say it. I would a lot of times I'll give a free moment. Like I've gone through all the postures that I had planned in our cool down, and I'll be like, if there's any final postures that you feel like you want to seal your practice with, go for it now. And eventually we're going to meet up in Shavasana. And so some people are doing some postures, some people are super ready to rest. And so I'm just kind of letting that be as it needs to be. And so I'm like, as you're finding your final posture, you might think that, dancer pose was our big peak posture, but truly everything was leading up to this moment right here. Because, we were putting in all of that right effort for our body. We're strengthening and stretching our bodies so that now our physical form is less of a distraction. Now we can settle in and we can allow the dust to settle. And the beauty is, whatever you see beyond that dust settling, that's the true connection to your intuition or your path forward. Or that's something that I don't even know. That's something that you're going to experience and you're going to get to see what's on the other side of the dust settling down to the bottom. And then I might say one final little bit of like, okay, now that you're all settled, we might really embark on Shavasana with a big inhale and a big exhale. And I might say, take rest. But like that right there before Shavasana, or like as you're getting to Shavasana, to me, that's the wrap up. And if I'm in a class where I do bring people back to a comfortable seat, I keep it very simple and I keep it very, let this be whatever you need it to be. Any intuition that you might, any spark of brilliance that you might have seen in that Shavasana when the dust was settled, like hold it close to you. And I'll do a very simple wrap up. But for me, the big bow that I tie is right before Shavasana, because then it's like I'm giving you that free rein to be in the bow, to be in the beautiful mess. I mean, everybody's having a different experience.
Yeah, I love that conclusion. Like, definitely ties it up in a bow, let the dust settle.
I am also a firm believer, and this is just like my belief on life and not just a yoga class, is like when we can allow the dust to settle and we can start to live in that space, that's how we get connection to our intuition. Because the thoughts of like, I need to do this, I'm not doing that enough, and like keep up with blah, 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 X, Y, and Z, all the things, like those are the monkey mind thoughts. And we need those. They're not the enemy. They help us navigate our world. But I used to think like, oh, I don't have any intuition. I'm not connected with what I need to do. I'm like, oh, it's just because I was listening to the fluctuations of the mind. And if you can get yourself to that state where the fluctuations calm down, we all have access to our intuition. But it's from that space where we can allow the thoughts to settle.
Yeah. Well, cool. All of this info, all of these phrases, the snow globe analogy, everything, we're going to put it into an inspo sheet, condense it into that so that our listeners can grab it at themeweaversyoga.com/episode 30. Oh my gosh. That link will be in the show notes. So our listeners, you can use that inspo sheet to bring Elissa's back pocket theme to life in your own voice and your own teaching. And Heidi, you want to wrap us up?
Oh, of course I do. Elissa, if our listeners want to find you, I know I said gesticulate on Instagram. That's where they find you. Is that like the best place?
That's the best place. Yeah, I'm always updating things. That's where you're going to see the most current version of myself. I do have a website, but it's never current. It's never updated. So Instagram is the living, breathing me. And then of course, come find me in New York City.
In real life. Yes.
Anytime fish comes through.
Oh, they definitely. Or just like you're going to, if only my daughter actually liked yoga, and then I'd come, because I have been going to New York to go see shows with her sometimes, but I'm like, that will not work.
Anything that mom does is not cool, so.
One day she'll see how amazing I am. Anyway, Elissa, we're so grateful to you for taking the time and coming on and talking with us. And selfishly, like, I absolutely love it. Like, 'cause two of my absolute favorite people are right here on a screen from my closet. I now do this in my closet. Of course, you can reach out to us on Theme Weavers Yoga on Facebook, Instagram, or email, and let us know how Elissa's back pocket theme lands with your students if you teach it. We're here to support you, fellow yoga teacher, in your class preparation and delivery, so let us know how we can be of the most support. Tune in next week for another episode of Theme Weavers, and until next time,
we weave you in peace.
Oh, we're so dorky.
I love that.